Hey everyone, in this one we're going to be looking at how you separate your data out between your actual, not necessarily users, but between your customers. So you may be selling your application to businesses, and each business that uses your application may have 5, 10, 15, 20 users who all need to get at the same data. So setting up this kind of rule where each user can only see their own data is fairly straightforward in Bubble. But what about if multiple users need to see the same data, but then you need to separate out the actual data in your database between your end customers, because you could have many users on the app, but you've only got one database. So you need to find a way to separate that data out so you avoid a disaster of cross-contaminating your data between your end customers. So let's take a look at this and how you would do it. Where a lot of developers separate their data out is actually based upon the user. So as you know, within each record on a database, we can see that we've got who the creator was. So you can more or less say we want to set up a rule to say that the user can only see the data that they've created. Okay, but we can't do that in this case because Jane in accounts wants to be able to see the data that Dave in invoicing or whatever has put in. You know, you need to see that as long as it's within the same company, the same end customer that I can call like a SaaS account, software as a service account. So I've got a table here, a data type with that on there, and you can see that I've just put some fields in there like expiry date, the maximum number of users that are allowed on the plan, the name, maybe the name of the account, whatever, the plan that they're on if you're going to be publishing different plans. Well, you know, this can be anything that you want. I've also got a list of users who are going to be the admins, you know, the kind of users who can access settings and things like this. So what I've done then is on each type of data, I've also put a SaaS account on there, okay? Because like I say, this isn't going to be based on the user, it's going to be based on the company, the end customer, who's going to be a business with lots of users. So therefore we need to assign that to each individual record so that we can query it, we can make sure it is separated out. So I've done that on the transaction here, and I've done it on the business entity as well. And also on the user is assigned a SaaS account. Now there's a couple of ways to do it, and one of those is using Bubble's privacy rules, which we'll go through in a second. But let's have a look at the other way that we could do it. So let's assume, obviously, at the front end that before anybody can get at our app, that they've got to log in, they've got to put in a username and password, or their email and password. And so when they do that on the user, we've got access to which actual SaaS account that they belong to, that the user belongs to, is assigned to. Okay, so if we go into our workflow, we're going to add an event, and let's say this is going to be when the page is loaded. So they've come from a login screen and now they're in our main app page. So what we can do there is to make sure that right at the beginning we get a hold of the current user's SaaS account so that we know it for the rest of the session. So I'll go and set a state, and just bring this over here, and on the page we'll create a new custom state, and we will say that this is called, we'll just call it SaaSac, and the type is going to be the SaaS account, okay? And then we're going to assign that to the current users, or we're going to assign the current user's SaaS account to our custom state that we can then use. And then if we look at our design, I've set up 3 repeating groups, one to list the users, one to list the customers, and one to list the transactions. So what we'll be able to say on here is search for users is just to say that we only want to see the users whose SaaS account is the one that's currently in use based upon the user that's logged in. So we go to pick up our custom state, and we do the same here for our business entities. Add a constraint for SaaS account has got to be equal to the current logged in user's SaaS account. Same with this one, search for transactions, add a constraint, and we only want to see okay. So we've assigned those, and note we had to set those up every single time. So, but then what we need to do before we run it, if we go into our data and we go to into app data and users, we can see we've got 2 users here, and each one is assigned to a SaaS account, a different one. So we look at our SaaS account data, we've just got the 2. That gives us some basic information like when it expires, how many users, and so on and so forth. And we can see that each user is assigned as an admin. So if we go to users, we can say run as. So when we run as Sally Wheeler, the idea now is that is only going to get the data that is assigned to this particular end customer, our SaaS account customer. Sorry, so I need to select run as there. Okay, and now we get, as we expected, logged in as Sally Wheeler. So this SaaS account, this end customer, is assigned 1 user, and they're the customers for that account, and then the transactions for that account as well. And so that's the data that we get. If we go back based on the queries that we set, and we're now going to run it as a different user from a different end customer, a different SaaS account, we'll get a different set of data. Okay, and that's great, that works fine, there's no harm in that at all. And because the query's being sent to the server and it's been run on the server, then pretty secure effectively. So now let's look at the other way of doing it, which is using Bubble's privacy rules. So if we take a look at our data types, okay, we can see the user has some privacy rules applied. So let's have a look at that, and the way we do that is in here under our privacy tab. And at the moment it's just saying that the user's own data, so it's basically saying on the user only show the users where this user is the current user, but for everyone else it's still letting them find it, but it's just based upon the first name, the last name, and the profile image. So the problem that we've got with that is the way that we did it before on our users is that we made sure that only the users for this particular SaaS account got shown. So we need to do that here as well. And we need to be a bit more stringent than Bubble is at the moment in terms of its default privacy rule with this. So for everyone else, they just can't get out the data. You know, there's no point in kidding on, is that if they don't belong to the SaaS account, then they can't get at that data. Now again, this is only looking at the user's data, okay? This isn't looking at everything else, just the user's actual data. So what we'll do, rather than delete that, what we'll do, we'll define a new rule, and we'll call this one SaaS user rule, and we will create that. And we will say that this user SaaS account is current user's SaaS account. Okay, so that way we're gonna make sure that we get access to all of the users that are accessing this. Now what we can do there, for example, is we can say take away view all fields, and we can say other users can only see the first name, the last name, and the profile image. Okay, on that, and then if it's the actual user's own data, then they'll be able to see all fields. Okay, so it gives us the opportunity to see that down to the field level at least. But definitely on this one, we don't want anybody else to see that. If it doesn't match this rule or this rule, everybody else, they can't see it, because you can imagine you've got another customer there that's completely different end customer, different company, different account altogether. You don't want them to be able to see anybody else uses data. If we're just listing users, which is a fairly rare event, we could just set it up on here as we did, as we've got it previously set. The trouble with doing this, especially once we're doing it on the customers and the transactions, as you can probably guess, is we've got to remember to do it on every single one. So every single query, whether that's on a repeating group or in a workflow, every search that we do on data, we've got to add this as a constraint, and it's almost guaranteed that you will miss one. In some corner of the system you'll miss one, and next thing you've got cross-contamination of data, where you're in a situation where one end customer can see another end customer's data, and that's that spells disaster. So there's nothing wrong in this. In fact, the privacy rules basically does this. When we set them up to be based on just give us this SaaS account data, it does exactly this. It just adds it as another constraint on a query, but it does it automatically for us. It adds it to every single query we run without us having to think about it. And that's where privacy rules really win with that. For now, we'll just leave that there, and we'll go to this one for transactions. At the moment, everything is publicly visible, so we want to change that. So we will say transaction rule. And what we'll do there is we'll just do exactly the same thing, but we'll say this transactions SaaS account is current users SaaS account. And notice we can't use that custom state on this. It only gives us access to the current record that we're assigning the rule on and the current user, so we can't start accessing that. And that makes sense if you think about it, because the idea with this is about security. So it doesn't want anything from the client side, which is where custom states are stored, getting involved. This is all run on the server end of things, okay? And that makes it very, very secure, which is great. So what we can do there is to show everything. On the other hand, we don't want anybody seeing anything, okay? If the transaction that we're showing is not assigned to the current user's SaaS account, we don't want anybody else seeing that, okay? So, and we'll apply that up here to this business entity. So we'll do the same thing with this. And again, we can say that when this business entity's SaaS account is current users SaaS account, then they can see it. Otherwise, they can't see anything, okay? And so what we can do there is, now we've set this up, is if we go back to our design and we now change this, so we still do a search for users, but we'll get rid of this constraint. Not our customers, again, we'll get rid of the constraint. So we're not querying for that account. We're going to be relying entirely on our privacy rules that we just set up to do that. And again, we'll go into our data and we will run as this particular one. Okay, and without putting any constraints, is now limited us to that data for this particular end customer SaaS account. Okay, and we've not had to do anything beyond setting up those rules other than that. And let's run it as this one. And again, we get the different set of customers. So the end result is the same, but using Bubble's privacy rules, number one, it is more secure. Okay, in terms of that Bubble is dealing with it on the server side. And secondly, we do not have to assign that everywhere in the system. Once we've set it on the privacy rules, everywhere else we can be guaranteed it's going to work. Okay, we don't have to go back and say, you know, be thinking to ourselves, we've got 1,000 different searches going on in our app in all sorts of places, in some really deep dark crevices, corner of the app that's perhaps you didn't test or didn't use or whatever, or didn't test with a runners or something like this, and you're then in a situation where you just don't know. You can never be 100% sure that you haven't missed something. With this, you can be guaranteed you're not going to miss anything, because Bubble is going to take care of that for you, as long as you've got privacy rules on there, which all you've got to do is look at the custom types and you can see which data's got a privacy rule applied. Okay, so let's take this another step further. So if we look at our privacy rules for our user, we've applied it to make sure that only if the user's SaaS account is the same as the current logged in user's SaaS account do we show the information, and we limit it to the first name, last name, profile image, and if it's the same user's data as the current logged in user's data, then they can see all of their fields. Okay. If we look at our data, if you remember, on our SaaS account we do have a field here called admins, and that is a list of users. So in other words, you could have 10 accounts, but maybe only 2 or 3 of them are actually in the admins list. So let's have a look at that. So I've added a new user, that Phil Simpkins here, and he's from the same SaaS account as Sally Wheeler. But if we look at our SaaS accounts with our admins, we can see that he isn't included in our admins list for this particular SaaS account, so he's not going to be considered to be an admin. Okay, so Sally, we do want you to be, for Sally, who is an admin, we do want her to have access to all of the user's information, but anybody who's not an admin can only display, just like here, first name, last name, and the profile image, and so on and so forth. So what we can do there is to add another rule here for that. And so what we'll do, we'll say define a new rule, and we will call this SaaS admin rule. And what we'll do, we'll put everything that applies to the admin rule from this. So we'll just repeat this here. So we'll say this user's SaaS account is current user's SaaS account, and then we can say and we say current user. Remember that we know that current user is the same as this user, otherwise we wouldn't have met this condition, or certainly the SaaS account anyway wouldn't have met this condition. So we can then say that the current user's SaaS account admins contains, and then we can say the current user. So what we're saying here is, just like we're doing here, is make sure that before we show this record that it is the same SaaS account as the current users, and then we're saying that the current user's SaaS accounts, which we know is the same as this one, their admins do contain the current user, and then we can use different rules. So then we can say, yeah, view all fields, finding the searches, and so on and so forth. If it doesn't meet this condition, it'll fall through, meet this condition, and then they're just going to be limited to the first name, last name, and profile image. They won't be able to get an email or anything else that we've got in there. You know, if you want to put things like salary or whatever, they wouldn't see anything like that. So just the admins can see that information. So let's try that out. So if we go to our design, first and foremost, I've added in here, I've just added it so it shows the first name, the last name, and the user's email. Okay, so if we go into data and app data for our users, and I just say, yep, run as Sally Wheeler, then we get both users, and it shows both users' email address. Okay, so because I'm a Sally, it's showing me Sally's email address and also another user's email address. Okay, so that means that it has fallen into this rule here because Sally is an admin for that user, so it's showing everything. If I do a different thing here and I go and log in as Phil Simpkins, who isn't an admin, then we'll see something slightly different. We'll see that it's not giving us access to Sally Wheeler's email because we've told it on the rule, if you're not an admin, you don't have access to that information. Okay, and that could be a way to protect lots of different types of sensitive information that you only wanted certain types of users to show, such as admins. So privacy rules on Bubble, fantastic way of securing and separating your data, not just between users, but between end customers, your app's customers, to make sure that multiple users can access the same data when they've got the same rights, as we've just shown there, but also to make sure that customer A, who's on one side of the world, can't see customers B, who's on the other side of the world's data, even though the users within those customers can see the same data. So privacy rules is a way to go. Definitely don't do it manually, as I've shown you in the first example. I've just shown you that to contrast how easy it is to do it on the privacy rules. Hope you've enjoyed this. This is a fairly new channel, guys, so if you can like the videos, if you get any value out of any of these content that I put out, if you can like the videos, that helps Google to push the channel's videos up in the old searches, which help more people see it, and hopefully more people get value, and then I can make more content. So yeah, if you can like it, if you really like it and you want to see more videos, don't forget to click subscribe and also click the bell to make sure that you get notified as well when I put new ones out. I'm planning on doing one and more likely stepping up to 2 a week, so there will be a lot more coming. Just a quick shout out as well is, as you're probably aware, I'm more like a business app developer. So I tend to focus more on like the logic side of things and the building out the workflows and the business systems, which really excites me, the fact you can do that in Bubble. But if you're more into the design element side of it, there is a new channel that's come out by a guy called Mickey. It's called No Code Knowledge. So if you're interested, I'll put a link somewhere to his channel. He's fairly new as well. He's only done sort of a few different videos, but they're really useful and might help you if you're looking for more information on the design side of Bubble. So again, thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you soon in the next one, and don't forget to take it easy.